Case of the Tainted Juror. Sounds like something out of some kind of mystery novel, not true. Well, the issue of the Tainted Juror has been at the heart of this cartel case, and I want to break it down for you so you really understand exactly what happened here. Stay tuned. Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. For those of you who are returning, glad to see you again. And for those of you who are visiting this channel for your first time, welcome, welcome, welcome. And everybody, please subscribe. All right. Okay. So the case of the Tainted Juror. If you've been following the cartel case at all, you know that this has been at the heart of the matter. And this is the reason the Privy Council quashed the convictions of Kartel and his 3 co-accused in March 2024. So let's back up a little bit so we understand exactly what happened, because it actually is a really, really interesting story. By way of background, first of all, the cartel case started with 12 jurors. All right. Now, by law, there can't be less than 11 who heard this case. So what that means is that you have a spare juror, spare tire, call it that, no disrespect. But you have a spare juror who, if somebody needs to go home for whatever reason, the trial can still continue, and something did happen, which you'll hear about in just a moment. All right, so the trial starts. You actually had 3 situations in this case involving jurors. The first one didn't turn out to be anything at all, but I mention it just for the sake of completeness. All right. In January 2014, there was an encounter between one of the jurors and one of the defense lawyers. That's not supposed to happen. So the judge was informed, the judge looked into the matter, and the judge decided, okay, this was an accidental encounter. It's not going to prejudice anything. Case can go ahead. And both the Court of Appeal and the Privy Council agreed with that. So fine, that wasn't a problem. Then we came to February 2014. Something happened that was to prove really, really important. One of the jurors came to the judge very, very upset. It turned out that she had a son who was at the Horizon Remand Center, which is where the accused men were staying as well. And they came to know of his presence and to understand and to know that his mother was serving on their jury. So the juror was really upset. She was concerned about her son's safety, and she just wanted to be let off. The judge discharged her. So we are now in a situation where we're down to the 11 jurors. So the spare juror has been excused. So there are no more spare now. You're at 11. Can't lose any more jurors, or the matter would have to be discharged. The matter could not go ahead. Then what happens now? On the very last day of the judge's summing up, the forewoman lets the judge know that this juror, Juror X, he is called by the Privy Council, has tried to bribe her with $500,000 to render a not guilty verdict. No. She said that this is a juror she's been suspicious of from the very beginning. She said she was actually watching him and she was asking him, hold on, are you paying attention to the case? Are you listening to the evidence? And his response was, no, we just need to let go demand them. So that was his stance from the very beginning. And then now he came and tried to bribe her. It didn't stop there. It emerged that for weeks, the man had been trying to bribe other members of the jury, and it turned out that he had approached every single person on the jury and tried to bribe them. So it was brought to the attention of the judge, and the judge says, what am I to do now? What am I to do with this? Again, remember, it's the very last day of his summing up. You know, so all the evidence is in, that part of it is finished. The judge is now helping the jury by summing up everything that has happened and helping to explain the law to them. And the very last day he's doing this, he hears this. So remember, normally in a situation like that where you have what's called jury tampering, you know, or a problem with any kind of juror, you could look at discharging, sending home that particular juror. But remember what happened in this case. We've already let go one juror. We're now at 11, can't go to 10. So if he sends home this juror, it's the same as sending home the entire jury. And it's that in that case, the case would have to stop, would have to start over from the entire beginning. And remember, you're talking about time, you're talking about cost, you're talking about multiple lawyers, first of all. So you're talking about a significant delay in just trying to get the matter scheduled again because people have other things they're doing. Them things that this case done, they have their diaries, they're moving on to other cases, other things. So it's just a huge inconvenience. And who knows if the witnesses are even going to be available for a second trial. So the judge has a whole lot on his mind and he has a big, big decision to make. The decision he makes is that the trial goes ahead. It's going to go to its conclusion. The prosecution had said they think it's okay. They think the judge just has to warn the jury and remind them, hey, remember, you're here to do a job. You have to be impartial. You have to be fair. The defense lawyers say, we don't like this. But the judge makes a decision to go ahead. This decision later proved to be fatal to the case, fatal to the convictions, and this is why the Privy Council quashed the convictions. So this is what the Privy Council said. They say you have this situation where the jury had been contaminated for weeks by this man, right? He was sitting with them hearing the evidence. He went into the jury room with them as part of the deliberations. And remember as well, this was not a unanimous verdict. It turned out to be a 10-1 verdict. Guess who voted against? So you might say here, hold on, why is this a problem? Seeing that it ended up that there was a guilty verdict, a 10-1 guilty verdict, you might say, what was the harm? But what the Privy Council said here is that you have to look in looking at whether there's a fair trial. Did the men have a fair trial? Was there a right to a fair trial by an independent and impartial tribunal? Was that right breached? You have to look at whether the jury was swayed one way or the other. So was the jury influenced to vote not guilty? Well, that didn't happen here, but the concern then is the opposite. Was the jury influenced to vote guilty? And the reasoning was this: did they overcompensate? Is it that they thought that, hold on, maybe there's some link here between the bribery and the accused men? No evidence was ever shown of any such link, all right? Let me just say that straight up. But is it that maybe that was on the jury's mind? Were they, deciding to say, okay, there was an attempt to bribe me. I'm not going to be bribed. I'm not going to be influenced. I'm going to do the thing right. And in doing so, maybe went too far in the opposite direction. And maybe that the guilty verdict then wasn't free and fair, wasn't independently arrived at because their minds, either consciously or unconsciously, had been influenced in a different way, ended up with then decide. In other words, did they decide to punish the appellants, the men in this case, whether consciously or unconsciously? So there was a concern then about the verdict that had been arrived at. Now, the judge had done something, he hadn't discharged the juror or the jury, but he had given them a direction, what you call an instruction. But the instruction was to say, hey, remember you're here to do a job. Remember you took an oath to do the job fairly and freely. So remember your oath. And the Privy Council said, not enough. It didn't speak to the specifics of what happened in this case. They also said the judge hadn't done enough of an investigation. He had spoken to the forewoman, the matter to his attention, but they say he didn't speak to the other jurors to try to figure out what was going on with them. And according to to use their words, the extent to which the contamination had spread. They said the judge needed to have done that because in doing so, he would have then had enough information to say, all right, it looks as if, boy, this can't happen. I need to just discharge this jury and done. They said in the absence of that, and given the circumstances, the convictions had to be quashed. No, the Privy Council did say, they were sympathetic to the judge's dilemma, 64-day trial, expensive. Who knows if you're going to get the witnesses back for the next trial? Inconvenient to reconvene. Trust me, when you have multiple lawyers in a case, is hell for try to agree a trial date, especially in a matter as long as this, but in which everyone's diary is free, because people are now expecting, hold on, the case done. So they have other matters in their diary, maybe backed up. These are busy people. These are criminal lawyers who are in great demand. So the Privy Council said, we get it, we get it. We get that the judge was facing a difficult decision. We get that it was an unenviable position to be in, but they say he could not look at the issue of expense of a new trial and inconvenience and whatever, because what you're dealing here, did the men get a fair trial? Was their constitutional right breached? And that should have been the paramount issue that they were looking at. Now, the Privy Council did say, hey, here in England, we've dealt with that issue because they have a law there that says in the event that you have to discharge a jury, the case can continue, the trial can continue with judge alone. We don't have that law. So for us now, if we have to discharge a jury, we have to stop, have to start all over again. And there have been calls since the Privy Council ruling came down in March 2024 for us to amend our laws to make sure we have that in place. Because otherwise, think about it, anybody can just get up, run, go bribe a jury or members of the jury, and then the matter is going to have to be thrown out. So there have been calls for us to address this. And I would have thought with the Privy Council ruling coming down in March, I would have liked to see an emergency amendment dealt with and rushed to Parliament to ensure that this cannot happen again. Up to now, and this is June 2024, we have not seen that amendment. Of course, we'll see what's going to happen. We'll see what Parliament is going to do. Now, just by way of completeness, Juror X, his real name is actually Livingston Kane. He was arrested after the trial. He was tried. He was found guilty of attempting to pervert the course of justice, and he was sentenced to 9 months in prison. That sentence was handed down in March 2023. Gonna leave it there for today, folks. Thank you so much for being here. See you next time.